Hello. Apologies for the long time between reviews, but life and work kind of got in the way. So try to restart things with a big bang. Today I'm going to be reviewing one of the big boys. Yes, that's right. It's going to be a Patek Philippe, and in particular an Aquanaut Travel Time, which I've been really fortunate to be loaned for a little while. Now this watch really isn't cheap. The retail price is around 54,000 Singapore dollars, and that's if you're lucky enough to be able to get one at the retail price, which is virtually impossible at the moment. Actually, I can't really think of any time where it has really been that easy to get hold of this watch in the first place. But if you want to buy this in the secondary market, a new one is likely to set you back anything from 60 to 70,000 USD, which is around about 100 to 120,000 Singapore dollars. Now this review could be all about the hand finishing, the attention to detail that's lavished in each part of this watch. But let's face it, that'd be a bit boring, because while it's definitely true, it's been covered ad nauseum in other channels already. So instead of that, I'll be concentrating more on the functionality and the wearability of the watch. But first, a little bit of history. Now, the Aquanaut is a younger brother of the Nautilus, so it's 1997 compared to, I think, 1976, and you can see some of the similarities in the way that it's shaped. However, perhaps its biggest inspiration, or at least the reason that it was designed, probably comes from the AP Royal Offshore that was first released in 1993. Now, the Audemars Piguet eventually showed that there was a demand for a slightly different, less formal sports elegance watch from one of the Holy Trinity. So at least there was some precedent from the offshore in place before Patek actually thought about coming up with the Aquanaut line. So onto the travel time itself, or the 5164A as this version is. So it has to be said that this is a very elegant watch with a lot of functionality, and it is very comfortable to wear due to the rubber strap. However, there are one or two compromises that you might be a little bit surprised by here, considering the price of the watch. First things first, the watch really is gorgeous to look at. Now the rubber strap has been cut for someone who has a slightly larger wrist than mine, so that's why this doesn't seem to quite fit me when you see the video here. Note that for the Aquanaut, the strap is cut to fit the wearer, and as you can see from the clasp, there is no micro adjust. So if you're going to do this yourself, you have to be very careful with cutting the rubber strap so that you don't overcut it and then need to get another strap to replace it straight away. In other words, if you get this to fit too comfortably in a cool environment, you might find yourself in deep, deep trouble in the summer. So do bear that in mind if you are going to be sizing up the strap yourself. Okay, I said I wasn't going to talk about the finishing at all, but it's hard not to just mention it a little bit. So as you can see, the brushing on this case is really fantastic, and the legibility of the actual watch is brilliant. One thing that I like here a lot is the day-night indicators for home and local time, but more on that later. But first, let's look at the pushers. The left-hand pushers change the local time forward or backwards as you desire, and the crown only controls the time. And there's a separate pusher for the date. So you have pretty good separated control over every part of the functionality of this watch. And it has to be said, the time pushers here really make this watch super functional if you're a traveler or you need to track a different time zone for some reason. All you need to do here is to activate one of the buttons to advance or push back the local time hand, which then reveals the home time hand. And as you move the time forwards or backwards, you can see the day-night indicator change. So the day-night indicator is tied into the time of the day, and it actually starts to get dark or light around about 6 or 7 p.m. And that's going to be pretty useful if you're traveling, and it should also be very useful if you're setting the time when the watch is stopped. With a lot of these high-end watches, you're told not to reverse the minute hand. So at least for me, there's a large number of times where I'm in the evening on the watch, but I don't know that on an ordinary watch because there's no way to tell if you're AM or PM. And that can mean that you end up overshooting the correct date and time that you actually wanted to try to get the watch set to. Meaning that you have to go through another almost 24-hour cycle to get things back to where they should have been in the first place. Here you don't have to worry about that thanks to these day-night indicators, and it has to be said it's the same for a GMT where you've got the 24-hour indicator. It makes a really big difference to the watch, at least to me. Now, as you probably saw, as the hour hand changes, the date will also change to reflect the date of the local time. So all in all, the functionality and ease of setting here are truly brilliant, and it really puts to shame a lot of the GMTs, which can be a little bit footery, especially when you're trying to set the date. The Aquanaut is really easy to use, and you can derive a lot of pleasure from this if and when we can start to travel again. I mean, even today, if you work in a business with Zoom calls across multiple time zones, then this watch is going to be really useful and fun to play with on a daily basis. So let's have a look at the back of the watch, and the movement is really beautiful to look at. However, this is probably where the watch starts to show its age a little bit. The travel time uses the 324 SCFUS caliber, and perhaps not surprisingly, that's part of the 324 caliber family. That's getting pretty long in the tooth now. Unlike more modern calibers, you can expect the 324 to last roughly 48 hours. It has a minimum of 45 hours according to Patek. So this is a watch that will either have to be worn or wound more often than you might be used to if your collection mainly consists of more contemporary watches. Additionally, be aware that the 324 caliber's rotor can be a bit on the loud side when it's spinning. I've noticed this on a number of different 324 movements, so it's not just the Aquanaut that will have this, it's pretty much the entire line. And I think this probably comes from the bearings, but please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But for me, I like the sound of the rotor, and that's probably because one of the first watches I got when I actually got into watches properly was a Calatrava that had a 324 movement, and it's grown on me over the years. However, rotor noise isn't for everyone, and if that's an issue for you, then you might need to consider this watch carefully before pulling the trigger. And actually, that probably applies to all of Patek's 324 caliber based watches, and that does include the 5711 Nautilus. Now, having said that, I think it's fair to say that the rotor noise from the Nautilus and this Aquanaut are somewhat less noticeable than from the dress watches, so Calatravas, annual calendars, etc. The sports watches are a little bit less noisy in comparison. Now, like quite a large number of Patek's watches, especially sports elegance watches, there is lume here, and it is very, very attractive when it's charged up, but it does die fairly quickly. So if lume is important to you, and in particular long-lasting lume is important to you, then look elsewhere. But for sports elegance, which this is, the lume is pretty good, and it does allow for some really nice shots for Instagram, if that's your thing. So could this be an everyday watch? I certainly think so. The combination of the rubber strap that gives it great wearability, the size that allows it to fit under the cuff easily if you need to wear a shirt, and the overall feeling of balance on the wrist make this a fairly compelling choice if you have the money available and are able to find one. Additionally, the travel time is fantastic if you work in an industry that allows you to travel and or you need some way to track a different time zone regularly, or even more than one. Then this watch has you covered, provided that you like to play around with the travel time feature, and who wouldn't want to? So the main issues here are really availability and price. To walk out of a Patek boutique or authorized dealer with one of these on your wrist, you'll probably have to buy another of their watches at the same time too. Now, provided that you've got the money, that's not too much of an issue, as there's some absolutely gorgeous choices out there to choose from. However, you might end up having to spend 2 to 3 times the value of the Aquanaut to be able to walk out with it and another watch at the same time. Now, even if you don't want the other watch, it might still be the option to go for if that's available to you, simply because at least you'll be able to sell it on, and you'll probably make a bit of a loss, but you'll get most of your money back. And that's certainly going to be cheaper than going and buying an Aquanaut on the grey market, where it's going to cost you 2 to 3 times the price anyway. Now, having said that, the watch really does have a lot of charm, and it's easily one of the most comfortable watches I've ever had the chance to wear. That also applies to its rose gold cousin, the 5164R, and the base Aquanaut. However, I'm not so sure about the new white gold chronograph Aquanauts, as they feel a little bit too top heavy on the wrist, for me at least, and I've got a feeling that they would be a bit of a pain to wear for any length of time. So to summarize things here, if you have the money and are on the lookout for a watch that you can pretty much wear everywhere, then this might well be the one for you. So thanks very much for listening. If you like this video, please subscribe and leave a comment below. Until next time, thanks very much.